want to start the discussion with talking about the progression of a home brewer. Typically, a home brewer will start with their extract kit. Basically, they'll have a boil kettle and turkey fryer and carboy. It's just a basic kit that you can get at your local homebrew supply store or online at companies like More Beer, Midwest Supplies, and Northern Brewer. I recommend all three of those. So then you move up to all grain brewing to get away from the extract brewing. All grain brewing gives you a lot more control over the ingredients you have, the different levels of alcohol that you produce when you're brewing your beer, how much sweetness is in there, the different malts and roastiness, different flavors from the grain, and yeast. So that would be the next transition for that. There are a lot of different ways you can go. You can go to a full brewing sculpture, or do what I did and get the deluxe all grain system from one of the online stores again, and that consists of a couple of Rubbermaid coolers. So that would be step 2. You move into all grain. So you get comfortable with that, you get your process down. The next thing you need to do, actually what you should have done when you start extract brewing, is you need to start using temperature control for your fermentations. This freezer here is a box freezer. It's like 4.5 cubic foot. I added a Ranco dual temperature controller to it. I'll try and get a close-up of this later. That allows you to set the freezer for whatever temperature your yeast performs best at. That's probably the most important aspect of home brewing, is temperature control for your yeast. Ales typically can get away with 68 degrees, so if you have a room or basement that's fairly well temperature controlled and stays consistently around 68, you can use that. I didn't have that. I brew out in the garage and I ferment out in the garage, so I absolutely need to have this box freezer for fermentation purposes, so that gives me temperature control for that. And you'll see later on in the video I'm going to actually fill a keg from a carboy that's been in this freezer for a couple of weeks now. Okay, so you've gone extract brewing, all grain brewing, temperature control for your fermentation. The next big step that most brewers make, maybe brewers will jump into this earlier, I don't know, it's a pretty hefty price leap. But let's move into kegging. I initially resisted going into kegging because I wasn't interested in having beer on tap. I'm afraid that I'll just end up drinking too much and gaining too much weight, which for me is obviously a problem. But I did want to move away from having to bottle condition all my beers. Bottle conditioning leaves yeast sediment in the bottom of the bottle, and it actually gives a twang, taste to the beer that sometimes isn't pleasant. So I'm trying to make the best beer I can possibly make. My goal then was to get into a counter pressure bottle filler. There are a lot of different choices as far as filling a bottle. With kegging equipment, you can take a Cobra tap or a picnic tap with a very long line, maybe 10 feet of hose, and have everything at very cold temperatures. Your bottles at cold temperatures, the beer at a cold temperature, the beer is carbonated, and then you can just take this picnic tap and let it fill the bottles with it. You can put an extension on the tap, and you can bottle that way. That's your cheapest way. Obviously, you're not controlling the carbonation in the bottle because it's at air pressure or room pressure. What I wanted was to use a counter pressure bottle filler. So I did a lot of shopping. I bought a kit at my homebrew store. That's this. It's the CO2 canister. It's a Fox kit with a dual gauge regulator. And this is called a gauge cage, this middle thing on top. And what that does is it prevents the dials from breaking if this thing falls over. And I plan on taking this to remote locations, barbecues, etc. So there's a good chance that this will get knocked around, and I do want to have the gauge cage. I added some bolts here to keep this extended. Typically the gauge cage kind of collapses on itself, so you can just get some parts from your Home Depot. But this is the main thing I was looking for. If I can get it unwound. This is a counter pressure bottle filler. This one is from More Beer. It's got one valve. This hose goes to your keg, your corny keg. This hose goes to your CO2 tank, and then this valve controls those two. So what you do is, when you're ready to bottle, you would put this attachment in a bottle, turn your valve to the CO2 position. CO2 will flow down to the bottom of the filler and fill up and force the air out. CO2 is heavier than air, so it will force it out. And then when you're done with that, you swing it over and you open up the beer line. This would be attached to your beer. And then the beer would flow out. So then when the pressure builds up, this is a pressure relief valve. You can turn it and set it exactly to the level you want. And it'll allow the beer to slowly fill the bottle, maintaining pressure on top of the beer so that the CO2 stays in solution. Anyway, then you have a little bit of foam on the bottle. Quickly cap it, and then you don't have yeast sediment that you would with bottle conditioning. So this was I would have stopped here if I could have. You have a corny keg, the CO2, and the counter pressure. But it turns out you need to keep your beer cold when you carbonate it. So that means basically you got to step up to a kegerator. Perhaps you have an extra refrigerator or something in the garage. You don't actually have to go all the way to having the taps and everything with the kegerator. But you do need to get the beer cold, like 38 degrees, 40 degrees. Then you can put 10 pounds of CO2 pressure on it, and that'll give you approximately 2.5 volumes of CO2 in suspension, in solution with beer. If you try to pressurize beer that's at room temperature, or in Memphis 90 degrees, it'd almost be impossible because you'd have to put so much pressure on it. And so that meant a slippery slope as I dived in and bought all the equipment I need for kegging. So I'm going to go remote. I'm going to turn around and actually carry the camera around and do some close-up shots. Okay, this is a corny keg. Cornelius keg, soda keg, Pepsi keg. They all mean the same thing. This particular variety has a ball lock. There's a pin lock, which would have a small pin there. This has an in and an out. The CO2 goes in there. The beer comes out here. There are gaskets, both under here and here, under here and here, and then a very large O-ring gasket right there. I bought refurbished kits so I could rebuild these, and I've cleaned these corny kegs out several times. I'm saying these because I've got 3 of them. The first kit I bought from my homebrew supply store had a corny keg and CO2 bottle and gauge cage that ran about $200. Bluff City, Mid-South Malts is the supplier there. That's the tube inside. It's called a dip tube. I shortened mine by about 1/2 inch to 1 inch so that sediment would stay on the bottom of the keg and come out through the beer lines. So I promised to show a close-up of the cooling thing. This is a Ranco dual stage controller. It will heat and cool depending on the outside temperature of the freezer. Inside the freezer, a light bulb for heating. The freezer kicks on if it needs to cool down. because there's a light in here, I cover the carboy with a black trash bag so it prevents skunking. And that is a wee heavy that I'm going to put into a keg shortly. Now, let me show you the kegerator. This is a 14 cubic foot freezer that I bought from Lowe's. They have a very good deal. The light should kick on as soon as it warms up a bit. I've got some growlers for a beer show we have coming up. Some other beers I'm conditioning. Anyway, Lowe's 14 cubic foot frost-free freezer, running about $400. I got it with no shipping and no interest, as long as you pay it off in a year. But if you don't pay it off in a year, you're screwed. I have another temperature controller. This is single stage because all I need to do is keep it cold. It's going to be at a temperature low enough that I'll never have to worry about having to heat this up unless I live in an extreme climate. I talked earlier about the Cobra tap. This is a Cobra tap, or a picnic tap. When you go on a picnic, you take this along with you, and that's how you dispense your beer. I have another CO2 canister. I bought a second kit from a company called Midwest Supplies. They had the best deal I could find. It was $300. You get 2 used corny kegs, another CO2 cylinder. I had to buy the gauge cage separately. The dual gauge CO2 cylinders, it's kind of a scam. The CO2 inside is liquid, so it's either present or not. Basically, this gauge telling me the temperature or the pressure of the CO2 inside the canister is either full or it goes flat. So you don't really get much warning. Again, 2 more used corny kegs that have been reconditioned. And this I'm pretty proud of. I built this from components I bought at Home Depot. This is a manifold. And you can buy manifolds from many of the online suppliers. Piecing this together cost me about $70 to $80. So it's kind of pricey. All those brass fittings are a little expensive, but it gave me complete control over the size of the hosing. For example, this is 3/8 inch hosing. Those are 1/4 inch hoses, 1/4 inch nipples. That's a 3/8 inch nipple. All the valves are 1/4 inch. So you can tell the controller just turned the refrigerator on. The light popped on. Okay, so I have a distribution manifold and 3 different CO2 things to connect to the corny kegs. So that'll keep all the beer nice and carbonated. Now, how do you get the beer out? These are called shanks. They're 4-inch shanks. They're probably a little bit longer than I needed. But they're also these attachments. So that's the beer line. Goes through the door. Had to drill a hole through the door. I'll show you the device I used to do that. And then these connectors, which go to the beer out on the carboy. Can I take a break? Okay, I apologize about the pause, but as you might notice, I've connected the beer line to the keg. It's pressurized. And guess what? There's beer in there. So I haven't tried drinking this beer yet. It's only been under pressure for about 3 or 4 days. I guess it takes 7 to 10 days to pressurize your beer correctly. Anyway, so back to this. The 4-inch shanks. And grab a glass while I'm at it. That's the other nice thing about having a freezer, is you have room to store your grains and keep some glasses. That way your wife's not picking on you to move stuff. Okay, these came with the kit. I did an upgrade on the faucets. These are the Ventmatic faucets. I guess Ventmatic went out of business, but Midwest Supplies had plenty of them on stock. The upgrade cost $22 per faucet. So that's a 6-inch drip tray, which they didn't really specify. So that basically, in a nutshell, is the equipment that you need for kegging. Grand told, if you buy new equipment like I did, and well, except for the corny kegs, you're going to end up paying around $1,000 to $1,200. I'm sure that somebody's going to be able to put it together for cheaper, but this is the best I could do given my resources. Alright, as I mentioned earlier, one of the benefits of having CO2 is you can purge your equipment. What I'm about to do is siphon this wee heavy, Scottish wee heavy, out of the carboy where it's been fermenting, it's done fermenting, and put it into this corny keg. But instead of worrying about it getting oxygenated now, I can purge the corny keg with CO2. So that's one of the benefits to this whole process. We'll take that out. Fairly certain there's a good layer of CO2 at the bottom. If you really wanted to check, you could probably take a match and go down, and when the match went out, you'd know that you were at the CO2 layer. So this is the self-priming siphon. One of the best investments I ever made. Highly recommend it. Give it a couple of good pumps. You take this nice clean beer, filter it down into your corny keg. This has been at almost freezing temperatures for a couple of days, so the yeast has crashed to the bottom. There's a little bit of scum here from the fermentation. I'm doing something new this time on a recommendation I've heard. That's not transferring to a secondary. This was completely fermented in a primary. So while that's happening, I think it's time to see what the first beer out of my kegerator tastes like. As anticipated, it's not too well carbonated. It's got some though. Give it another 5-6 days. This is a Snipes Mountain Sunnyside Pale Ale. That's good. Nice and hoppy. Well, I hope you enjoyed my video, and hopefully it's not too long or boring. And look forward to more content coming from BigFoamyHead.com.